Everyone needs some time alone every now and then. Some people are happy with a private hour once a week, while others are, substantially more extreme. From people living in the Arctic wastelands to escape civilization to hidden homes in the middle of lakes, here are some people who must really hate the outside world. Solo Siberia. In the vast, desolate stretches of the Siberian wilderness, there are settlements so empty, sparse, and isolated, you could drive for days without reaching any major towns. Despite extreme isolation, some people willingly choose to inhabit these sparse settlements. One such individual is a woman by the name of Agafia Lykova, who is the sole occupant of a tiny, rudimentary settlement in the southern Siberian Republic of Khakassia. Agafia's family first moved to the location, which is 150 miles from the nearest town, in 1936, before Agafia was born, fleeing religious persecution by Soviet forces. Setting up a home in the middle of nowhere, Agafia's parents and siblings lived a life of scarcity with the little food they could grow, hunt, and gather. This only got worse when Agafia was born in 1944, bringing another mouth to feed. Regardless, the family continued to live there, though by the time they were discovered by chance in 1978, only Agafia and her father were still alive. Despite offers to bring them back to the civilized world, the Lykovas chose to remain in the wilderness. Agafia's father passed away in 1988, and his surviving daughter has lived largely alone in the settlement ever since. She admits it's not easy keeping a house all by herself out in the wilderness, especially now that she's in her 70s and her health is declining. She gardens, fishes, forages, tends to goats and chickens, and prepares firewood for herself. But despite the ceaseless efforts necessary to survive, the wilderness is her life, and she still doesn't want to move somewhere more comfortable. She states that in the few visits she's made to towns and cities, the air and water made her sick, and the busy roads frightened her. So instead, she chooses to remain in place, even if it means fending off the occasional bear. Agafia's unusual home is proof that there's not just one way to live life. And if the many varieties of life and all the fascinating stuff they encapsulate interests you, be sure to like this video and subscribe to be amazed. I post this kind of thing daily, so do your brain a favor and subscribe. Now, back to some people who aren't quite as welcoming as yours truly. Korowai tree houses, New Guinea. Until they were first contacted by anthropologists in the 1970s, the Korowai people of West Papua were reportedly unaware of the existence of societies outside their own. Isolated from the outside world, these forest-dwelling people, whose population numbers around 3,000 today, developed a fascinatingly unique culture of their own. While they occasionally take guests nowadays, the Korowai have a history of being extremely skeptical of outsiders. To find signs of this distrust of villagers, you only need to look upwards in their settlements to spot their remarkably unusual practice of constructing tree homes up in the canopy. These remarkable accommodations, constructed using banyan or wandum trees, can be as high as 114 feet tall. But is this practice done to avoid visitors on the ground? Well, not entirely. While not all Korowai live in treetop houses, those who do are elevated from the swarming mosquitoes below, while also receiving shelter and a good view of the surrounding areas, which, of course, grants them the ability to judge the character and intentions of an incoming outsider before they're too close for comfort. So, while they don't live in trees solely to avoid guests, I'm sure they still appreciate the option to climb into their tree houses if they ever want some alone time. Port Lockroy, Antarctica. For anyone who doesn't particularly like the hustle and bustle of modern city living, few places are more likely to provide the polar opposite than the Antarctic. And of all the spots you might choose to set up shop in the Earth's chilliest continent, Port Lockroy is a good starting place if seclusion is your cup of tea. This bay lies on an archipelago north of the Antarctic mainland and is home to the most southerly operational post office in the world. The port originally served as a research station, but is now a stop-off destination for boats in Antarctica, despite being partially surrounded in sea ice for a good part of the year. With the post office and accompanying gift shop tended by a staff of only around 4 people, the only humans usually living at the port, life here is no easy feat. While visitors to the island are somewhat regular, it still demands the ability to live perfectly happily without the luxuries of society, and to get along peacefully in close contact with a very small group of other attendees. But there are other permanent residents on the island. They're just, not human. The penguins that also call the area their home provide constant entertainment, although the workers' duties involve scrubbing away penguin, guano to prevent it being traipsed into the post office. Unfortunately, once the penguin poop cleaning's all done, there's no hot shower facilities to wash off, unless a ship docking in the bay has those facilities on board to use. As a matter of fact, there's no running water at all, no mains electricity, and no internet. The inhabitants of the port rely completely on supplies brought in by visiting ships. There's not even a proper toilet, just a bucket that gets emptied into the sea. But for those who work there, who seem to enjoy the relative seclusion, the sunsets make it all worth it. Ocean Restaurant, Zanzibar. For those seeking a bit of time away from the busy world, or just hate being among other people, a restaurant isn't usually the solution. Luckily, one restaurant in Zanzibar, Tanzania, known as The Rock, has these kinds of people covered. They cater to folks who like to get away from other people by keeping their restaurant offshore, suspended on a rock in the Indian Ocean. During high tide, the restaurant becomes a miniature island of its own, accessible via a very short boat ride or swim to the rickety wooden steps. While it can be accessed on foot during low tide, those with a preference for privacy will likely choose the other option of being surrounded by turquoise seas during their meal. And really, who can blame them? With a beautiful patio out back, refreshing cocktails and wines on demand, and fresh seafood on the menu, The Rock is a truly idyllic spot. And of course, it's the perfect place for those who want table service without having to encounter too many members of the public. After all, putting an ocean between yourself and others sends a pretty clear message. Volcano House, California. Another ideal location for a lover of solitude is slap bang in the middle of a desert. And this is precisely the type of location architect Harold Bissner Jr. chose to build a home in 1968. Located in the already sparse town of Newberry Springs, California, this is known as the Volcano House and was built to provide a solitary home with 360-degree panoramic views of the surrounding desert, bringing to mind a lonely alien's UFO parked up on an even lonelier planet. The house is constructed on a cinder cone of ancient volcanic material passed up through the earth. Of course, the cone's completely safe now and provides a great vantage point for the residents of the domed house that sits atop it. With the property's 60 acres of land and the vistas beyond it viewable through floor-to-ceiling glass, including a private lake, desert living doesn't get much better than this. Inside, there's artfully crafted curved wooden beams, exposed brickwork, and fancy-looking fireplaces and furniture, all lit by the natural daylight that washes in through the sliding glass windows and doors. So, not only are the residents kept at a distance from the outside world, they also get a clear view of any outsiders trying to get in. Looking like a Bond villain's lair, it's the perfect place to plot out evil schemes, or just relax and take in the scenery, whichever's more your kind of thing. Hidden homes. A less conspicuous way of keeping yourself to yourself in terms of your home is by choosing to blend into your surroundings. Few people do this better than the residents of these amazing-looking turf houses, found in various forms throughout several culturally tied regions of Scandinavia and Iceland. These houses usually consist of a birch timber frame filled in with peat or turf blocks forming the walls. The grass within the turf is allowed to grow out, adding an extra layer of insulation against the chilly climates of the northern realms. Some even take it a step further, planting trees in the fertile turf of the roofs. Although, as you can see, this extra weight sometimes warps the buildings below. While traditionally designed more for practical usage of available materials than a need to hide away, there's no denying that from certain angles, these turf-covered homes are pretty difficult to spot. Some are even set into mountainsides, increasing their stealthiness even more. This construction style likely originated from the traditional homes of the Sami people, who have inhabited lands across northern Norway, Sweden, and Finland for thousands of years. While Sami abodes are more hut-like in appearance, you can certainly see the similarities to more modern turf homes, given that they're similarly constructed out of wood, peat, and turf. So if you're sick of being disturbed by people knocking at your door, find a nice spot, grab a shovel, and make yourself a nicely hidden home in the grass. Just don't be offended if your friends start calling you Bilbo Baggins. In fact, I take that as a compliment. Meteora Monasteries, Greece. If you ask me, establishing a living space atop a sheer cliff seems to send a pretty clear message of do not disturb. But that's exactly the type of location at which a complex of monasteries can be found near Catski, Greece, upon a rock formation known as Meteora. The rocks themselves are part of a stunning wider landscape, formed and carved into shape over millions of years by rivers that once flowed through this surreal land. Set atop these stunning rock formations, the monasteries provide a truly unique place of worship for followers of Eastern Orthodox Christianity, though visitors are technically welcome. These incredible religious sites were built with isolation in mind by monks seeking a perfectly solitary place to reflect on life's biggest spiritual questions between the 14th and 17th centuries. While reaching the building still requires some considerable climbing, the winding stairs available now are much more welcoming than the access methods of the past. The original occupants, occasionally facing persecution from Turkish invaders, made sure the only way up was via ladders. In the event of an attack, they could pull the ladders up, rendering their homes inaccessible from the ground. At their peak in the 16th century, there were 24 monasteries atop these towering rocks. But over time, most of them have been abandoned, leaving only 6 functional today. These remaining sites now provide a home to the relatively small number of monks and nuns, whose solitude is routinely disturbed by curious tourists. They don't seem to mind all that much, but maybe that's just because they're too nice to say anything. Considering you can see the other monasteries across the gaps, I wouldn't be all that surprised if monks complained to each other using big gestures and binoculars every now and then. Homes on the river. The easiest way to keep yourself to yourself is to put some kind of obstacle between your home and the outside world. While a fence usually fits the purpose for most people, others around the world have opted for more by putting a body of water between themselves and others. Houses constructed on rocks in the middle of rivers or lakes are certainly a rare sight to see, but they do indeed exist. Just take Clinkstone, otherwise known as House on the Rock, which can be found in Narragansett Bay near Jamestown, Rhode Island. This unusual property was built in 1905 atop a small rocky island right in the middle of the bay. Despite working with such an unusual building location, the house is 3 stories tall, has 23 rooms, and is constructed of heavy framing to withstand hurricane-force winds. Being on an open bay, this kind of strength is essential, as the strong winds over the open water are constant. Accessible by boat, the house is reportedly available to rent for $8,000 a week, when its owners aren't using it as a summer home, that is. So, if you've got some spare cash, love solitude, and don't get seasick easily, this could be the vacation spot for you. But if you prefer something a little smaller, there's always Just Room Enough Island in the Thousand Islands chain in New York State. The tiny island was purchased in the 1950s by a family looking for the perfect holiday spot, who decided to build a snug home with plenty of swimming opportunities. Despite being so close to the water's edge, the property never floods, as the tides of the St. Lawrence River upon which the house rests vary little throughout the year. With just enough space outside for some shrubs, chairs, and a tiny beach, the house makes for a cozy waterside getaway, even if it does undoubtedly cause a few perplexed looks from passing sailors. An even smaller water dwelling, though not quite a full-sized home, is found in the middle of the Drina River by the town of Bajina Basta in western Serbia. The small wood cabin sits atop a rock that has reportedly been used as a resting spot for swimmers crossing the river for centuries. Ever since the late 60s, people have been constructing cabins upon that rock, only to have the river sweep them away when water levels increase in the rainy seasons. However, the most recent iteration has stood strong since 2011, and hopefully it'll continue to hold it together for many more years. If and when it does get swept away again, though, the love the locals seem to have for this peaceful, secluded spot will likely mean somebody builds it right back up again. Personal islands. While a house built on a tiny rock in a river is great and all, some people want a little more space to roam all on their own. Private islands scratch that itch perfectly, and for a vacation getaway, few places are more perfectly suited to the lover of solitude than Noah's Island, found on Red Shirt Lake, Alaska. While the amenities are minimal, it's hard to deny the appeal of having your own island to roam in the middle of a 3-mile-long lake. The cabin is available to rent and can be reached by canoe or float plane. But if you'd like something slightly more luxurious, there are picturesque personal islands around the world you can actually buy too. Places like Little Pipe Cay in the Bahamas, which comes with a number of luxury houses and cottages for family and guests, all overlooking the pristine private beaches. Unfortunately though, you'd need about $85 million to own this 38-acre slice of private bliss. For something a little less luxurious, but with a hefty 554 acres of land to explore, Big Darby Island in the Caribbean is another option. The lush expanse features crystal-clear natural pools and an old castle built in 1938, which, despite being a little run down, would still make a fantastic secret lair. And if your private island wasn't already private enough, you can always take refuge in Big Darby Island's shoreline caves. However, the island's still extremely expensive at $39 million. So if you want some alone time on a private isle, maybe just rent out a cabin on Noah's Island for a weekend. Chateau Artisan, Florida. While some homes keep unwanted neighbors at bay by being built in the middle of lakes, rivers, or oceans, others are more creative with the water element. Take the exceptionally grandiose Chateau Artisan, an enormous French-style house built in Miami in 2007. The building of this house involved digging out 5 acres of land to craft a moat completely surrounding the property, rendering it only accessible via the main entrance or a boat. Costing $12,800,000 to build, the property justifies its own lavishness by making sure it has absolutely everything you could need, so you'll never even want to leave. Starting outside, there are the astounding gardens, which include covered lounging areas only accessible by stepping stones and a koi pond, not to mention the huge pool out back. Inside, there are 6 immaculately furnished bedrooms, a very fancy all-mahogany kitchen, a movie room, expansive living spaces, and, of course, a hot tub. All of this adds up to a place that's very much separated from the outside world. With the clean, symmetrical appearance of Chateau Artisan, if you lived here, would you ever want to leave? Let me know in the comments below. Martin Castle, Kentucky. In 1969, construction began on this crazy-looking castle near Lexington, Kentucky. with huge walls, an enormous perimeter, and guard towers that seem to say, "Go on, I dare you to try coming inside uninvited." Martin Castle is a private person's paradise. The castle was built like a literal fort by a coal industry tycoon whose inspiration came after his wife fell in love with the castles of Europe during their honeymoon travels. However, before the construction could be completed, the couple divorced, leaving the broken-hearted husband with a not-quite-finished castle on his hands. Considering the backstory, it's easy to imagine a heartbroken man holding himself up inside the castle, refusing to see anyone from the outside world. But that's not quite what happened. Local rumor has it that he never actually moved into the castle, but his heartbreak significantly delayed him selling the site, and it never found new ownership until 2003. Up until the sale, the solid construction stood eerily unoccupied for decades. Today, though, it's a luxury hotel and events venue, featuring premium sites, spectacular dining rooms, a library, sports courts, and a swimming pool, which makes this place a little more welcoming than those intimidating walls and turrets suggest. While it welcomes guests today, it's clear the original owner wanted to make a very loud statement about marking out his own space. Maybe it was all a bit much for his wife? Safehouse Poland. In terms of keeping unwanted outsiders from entering your home, it doesn't get much more effective than the Safehouse in Warsaw, Poland. Constructed with ultimate security in mind, it features automated sliding walls, hefty window shutters, and even has a drawbridge to get to the separate swimming pool building without going downstairs. On top of that, it comes with built-in solar energy storage, meaning anyone living here can be almost entirely self-sufficient, save for the occasional trip to the grocery store. Those bulky perimeter walls ensure that not even the postman gets close without the full permission of the homeowner. And should the owner decide they need some time completely separated from the outside world, they can close all the shutters and walls and turn their home into one giant concrete cocoon. Pretty crazy, right? Catski Pillar, Georgia. In the village of Catski, central Georgia, there stands a 130 feet tall natural pillar of limestone with a small church built on top of it. You may notice the similarities to Greece's Meteora monasteries, which we discussed earlier. But this one's even more isolated due to the fact that it's the only one in the area. On top of that, women have never been allowed to ascend the pillar. And since 2018, no non-church officials at all have been allowed up. That being said, considering you have to climb a rickety old ladder to reach the church, it might be for the best. Either way, it's a significant site for followers of the Georgian Orthodox Church, having been constructed around the 7th century as a place for undisturbed Christian worship and spiritual reflection. The pillar-top church is tended by an elderly monk who's lived there for more than 20 years and only comes down twice a week to pray at ground level with his followers. Reportedly, he's not bothered by the dizzying heights at which he lives, as he worked as a crane operator before joining the church. Plus, he says he feels closer to God this way. I can see where he's coming from. After all, he's basically in the heavens up there. Threadrunger Lighthouse, Iceland. For anyone seeking a career with plenty of quiet time alone, working as a lighthouse operator is probably the ultimate choice. And out of the many lighthouses in the world, you're probably least likely to be disturbed at the Threadrunger Lighthouse off the southern coast of Iceland. This lonesome beacon sits atop a 120-foot tall jutting rock, warning ships of the sheer cliff it sits on as well as the ones next to it. While it's now accessed and maintained via helicopter, it was constructed in the early half of the 20th century, before helicopters existed. This meant that the construction workers who put it together had to scale the cliffs daily to construct the lighthouse on the pinnacle. With the risk of slipping into the icy seas ever present, having to hoist building materials up there is not a job I'd envy. Despite the helicopter pad the island now has, there's still a notable element of danger in maneuvering those slippery rocks. as one wrong move could easily send unseasoned visitors over the edge. With such a combination of risk and isolation, this place is only for those who favor solitude over visitors, or those with disdain for the outside world in general. Would you like to stay at or even live in any of these insanely isolated places? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.